We do. Thank you very much. Will Susie lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next order of business is approval of the February 10th joint DRB and Planning and Zoning and Board of Adjustment meeting minutes. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Ayes appear to have it, do have it, and so ordered. Next order of business is discussion and possible action on case 2302 FW. Stacy, will you please walk us through this?
I will. Thank you, Chairman Burns. Thank you, members of the board, for this evening. We are looking at a fill waiver request, the location at 36449 North Sidewinder Road in our original Carefree subdivision. The applicant is Mr. Tyler Green, with the owners Mr. and Mrs. Sam and Katrina Reeder. This request is to allow for the quantity of fill beneath a building pad to exceed the quantity of cut in order to construct a detached guest house. The Development Review Board, under the zoning ordinance, has that authority to grant such a request. This one, as you probably read in your report, is an interesting one, and I'll explain it in just a moment after we kind of get ourselves oriented here. As you can see, the location off a Sidewinder, behind Nonchalant, again, original Carefree, just sort of around the corner from here. I tried to show some of the surrounding properties, in particular, sort of an idea of the home, the current garage a little bit to its north under construction, and then the small yellow star indicating where the proposed casita is located. What's important to that is understanding the house, the garage, they all sort of are working at sort of a similar elevation, and that is kind of at the heart of why the request. I'm looking at the site plan quickly. I think what's important about this, again, you can sort of see the closeness of sort of the small compound that the applicant is looking to have approved. You can see sort of the steep contours, so this is one of our sloping lots in our town center. Now looking at these elevations, and so yes, below the finished floor is open, but we do consider that while it's not technically physical fill, we do look at it as the reason we have the ordinance the way it is written is that you don't artificially elevate a floor elevation. And so we do ask that these requests do go in front of the Development Review Board. What this also shows is sort of a maximum height of what's permitted, and the way that that's broken down is that accessory structures are allowed to be 16 feet from its finished floor design grade. We allow an additional 5 feet because we typically would allow that as a stem wall. Anything beyond that would be terrace retaining walls. And so, as you saw in the packet, your materials, excuse me, that this particular project will not exceed that height. Through this public process, through the citizen participation process, one neighbor did reply. I spoke with her concerned about views. I did explain in your reports that her finished floor, her home is quite considerable distance higher than this proposed structure. So while she will see a structure, which also was of concern, it won't change or obstruct her views, her current views. The house behind is even higher elevation. Actually, it's a similar elevation. I did not hear from them at all. So with that said, I'm happy to answer questions. Also, the applicant is here if he'd like to make a small presentation, or if you'd like to ask him some questions as well.
Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Sure. Chairperson, Commissioners, my name's Tyler Green. I'm the architect. Just a few points with this. Yeah, the reason they are asking for this to be level with the garage is they hope for their elderly parents to be able to use the casita, and steps from the garage to the living space is a problem, and it also it will appear as one unit with the house, and everything being level makes sense that way. We did design it as a low-profile structure, again, to keep within the height limits, as Stacy suggested, using natural materials that'll blend in with the desert. And I think the fact that it's built above the desert will allow the natural desert to remain underneath there and really not disrupt any of the natural desert. That's all.
I noticed that there is a 1-foot difference between the floor of the casita and the floor of the garage. Is that something that you deliberately designed in, or is that required by the site or the ordinance?
It shouldn't in the, and there's a couple of different, an earlier version had the garage floor a different height from the grading plan, and on the most recent version, I tried to correct that, so I did bring the casita down about a half a foot that I can accomplish in between the two without steps, but I I shouldn't have a 1-foot difference, so I'm not sure. There may be some confusion with different versions there.
There was a one.
Yeah, it indicates a 1-foot difference. The reason I ask is if it's your concern that you have elderly residents, that creates a step, which sometimes
Yeah.
creates problems. Would it be better for you to not have that difference in height?
Yes, yeah, like I said, I can accommodate about 6 inches without steps just because of the separation of the building, so my intent isn't to have a foot difference there.
Would it, Stacy, can you tell us, would that mean that the height of the roof would then go up 1 foot? If my math is right. The building went up 1 foot.
I'll still have 6 inches, so I'm not sure where this discrepancy is coming from, but it wouldn't be more than a few inches difference from what
Okay.
you're looking at.
But Chairman, Commissioner, Board Member Hardy, that is something to think about. We'll have to see that as we get to the building permit, because we did discuss that sort of maximum flexibility of the 5 feet for the stem wall
Right.
allowance. So, but we would be sure that in the building permit, it would not exceed the allowable height.
I'm sorry, it would not what?
Exceed the allowable height, the 16 feet with the 5-foot sort of allowance for stem wall and grade. Mhm.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? I would take a motion to approve case number 2302 FW.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the case number 2302 FW with the conditions that are in the write-up.
Well, Chairman Burns, although my concern would be, I think that we do state that and I can pull it up, I don't have it in front of me, the grading plan. If you're approving this, the grading, you have to approve it with the condition of an additional 6-inch allowance, technically, because I think what Tyler Green is saying is that the finished floor that's shown now is not correct. I mean, I know we're talking inches here, but.
Well, inches make a big
but,
difference.
well, the ordinance is the ordinance, right?
Would you amend your motion?
Yes, I would move that this be approved with the amendment for the 6-inch difference in gradient.
Would you amend your second?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded with the conditions and an additional condition for 6-inch allowance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, so ordered. Next case is agenda item number 3, case number 2414 MS, Mountainside.
Give me a moment. Okay, great. Thank you, Chairman Burns. Yes, this is one of now transitioning to a Mountainside case under the Development Review Board purview. This particular property is located on East Sombrero Road in our Cowtrack Estates 2 subdivision. The applicant is Mr. Greg Wedge. The owners, Mr. and Mrs. Jim and Kristen Zebarb. Just to orient ourselves, here we are. You can see sort of at a crossroads near Sombrero, Paint Pony is the site itself. You can see kind of surrounding properties. The larger lot sizes, as you saw in your report, this is rural 190. To get an idea of the site in particular, this one is interesting that it's got quite a variance of different types of slope gradients, as well as a couple of wash conditions. And that sometimes does feed into why you see such a variety of different types of topography on a site like this. The topography is why it's mountainside, but also sort of the natural features, the wash is also, sensitive features also are included under our mountainside requirements. As you can see, and we'll look at this in a little bit more detail, the property has, the development is located within the majority of the slope areas that are less than 20%. Looking quickly at the site plan, I kind of gave you an overall as well as sort of a more detailed plan. The driveway was located to avoid a wash crossing. So it is long as it gets into the development part itself. That was reviewed and approved by Rural Metro. You can see that it is a tight development envelope, an interesting layout, taking advantage of views and creativity in our carefree environment. Related to the development standards that need to be met in the zoning ordinance, we have a lot coverage with a maximum of 6%. This property is proposed at 4.2, as well as disturbance is a maximum of 18%. It does not exclude the driveway. I apologize for that. It includes the driveway of almost 11.5%. It has been designed to comply with building setbacks. Talking about our building height requirements, it does meet our cumulative height requirements of 31 feet 8 inches, and as you recall, that is measured from the lowest natural grade under structure, which could be a retaining wall or it could be a building. The actual building height itself is 17 feet, does not exceed 17 feet, which also complies with our ordinance. Grading and drainage requirements have been met, or they will be met. It has met our town's development standards, and as noted in your reports, the cut to fill ratio requirement is not in compliance under the mountainside, but it is going to comply under the building permit. The variance is quite small, so the applicant wanted to move the project forward, and looking at a condition that it will be addressed at the building permit. The utilities, it will be carefree water for water service, and there will be an on-site septic for wastewater, which will be revegetated. Just like to give you sort of the idea of cumulative height. What's also being requested in this mountainside is our wall height waivers, which have also been described and outlined in your reports. As we've discussed before in the past, wall height waivers do limit disturbance. So, when you look at the final product, you evaluate, is it worth less disturbance to the natural environment with more of a wall or utilizing a retaining wall. So as I mentioned, we're looking for a wall height waiver. What's also under the Development Review Board's purview, as in all projects related to mountainside, would be the reuse of salvaged plant material and new native landscaping. Regarding the public process, there was one reply from a nearby neighbor, was a neighbor to the north. It's interesting, once again, a neighbor that's quite elevated from this parcel, but concerned about their views and what they would be looking at, and it seemed that they were satisfied by the architect's reply. As well, so we do recommend approval, and is related to, we don't recommend approval, but there is approval and conditions related to this project as seen in your report. The applicant is here if you have any questions or if you like a little further information about the project itself. I'm happy to answer those.
Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Mark Tate with Tate Studio Architects. We're the architect on this, and I'm not sure I could make a better presentation than Stacy did. We've worked diligently with Stacy and with Rural Metro and to meet as many of the guidelines as we could. We obviously had some challenges with some of the site walls, but we're trying to be really respectful of of the native desert out there. I want to disturb as little as possible, which you can tell by the presentation that Stacy did. We're pretty well under the max that we can disturb. So I can answer any questions if you have any, but I think.
Are there any questions?
I do.
Okay.
I noticed that the floor height is supposed to be 2,510.50. I assume that's above sea level? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay, above sea level, right? Okay. And the plan shows that your proposal is 1 foot higher, 2,511.
Correct.
But you're very generously agreeing to lower it. But my question is, to me, 12 inches is de minimis. It's of no consequence whatsoever. But tell me if I'm wrong. If your original plan is 2,511 and you're supposed to bring it down to 2,510, that means you have to remove 12 inches of dirt over the pad of 5,000, 6,000 square feet. Do you have any idea how much additional dirt that requires to be removed?
Mr. Chairman and Member Hardy, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. When we designed the house, we made certain that it was well under the maximum height that we're allowed. But as Stacy pointed out earlier, the 50-50 cut fill requirement, we changed that in deference to that requirement.
I understand, and I think that was
yeah.
very generous and reasonable of you, but it strikes me that to require you to expend the time and additional money to grade out another foot of land over some thousands of square feet is an additional expense that maybe is unwarranted. And so I would approve this with the recommendation that the applicant be allowed to build at the 2,511.50.
Well, Chairman
level.
Burns and Board Member Hardy, the reason that we're here, that wasn't part of the request. The zoning ordinance is what requires a 50-50 or less. So in your report, it does state that once they revise the cut and fill calculations, that they will have a net cut of 11.5 cubic yards. So I think it's important to, because there was no request to have additional fill under the building pad, under this mountainside request. And in spirit with the ordinance, the desire should be to meet that cut and fill requirement, as, again, we've talked about in the past, is that's sort of how we manage sort of that fair finished floor elevation for surrounding property owners. My concern would be is that was never sort of noticed with that request. So I don't know if you might have had neighbors that may have had concerns in that regard. But I just want to put that forward to you as to why, and you do have that information in your report as to what that adjustment will resolve.
Mr. Chairman, if I could speak.
Go ahead.
Please.
So Chairman Burns and Member Hardy, Stacy's absolutely correct relative to the zoning ordinance requirement of the 50-50. I will tell you that in other communities, in other cities, this cut fill requirement is sort of under review because, from an architectural perspective, if you understand that those guidelines were written initially to require that houses step down a hill, and we don't design houses that step down a hill anymore. The market drives us to put houses on one level. So that's what we've been doing, and as long as we can meet the height requirement, which is really the point of what Stacy's referring to, the finished floor is really irrelevant. The only argument that I've actually heard that makes sense, and Desert Mountain just went through this, they're getting ready to change their guidelines, is roadway damage or abuse to roadways. So if you can achieve a 50-50 cut fill, then you limit the number of trucks that have to come in and out. That's a good argument. And it depends on, the quality of the streets. So we're fine with it at that elevation. you know, in deference to trying to meet the specific language of the zoning ordinance. Maybe that zoning ordinance changes someday, but.
Do we have the power to approve this with that condition?
Which condition?
To allow him to build it at 2511?
Well, then he would have more fill than cut. That would require a variance. We
Well-
haven't been noticed on a variance.
Yeah, Chairman Burns, I go back to, it is a waiver request, just similar to the case that we just saw just prior, Tyler Green's. That was a fill waiver request. But I do go back to, I agree in the sense that when the applicant first sent out their notifications as to the type of project that they were proposing, they did not include that in this request. I would say that it seems that the applicant doesn't have, take issue with it, and it does meet the zoning ordinance requirements. So I'm not sure why the need to pursue a finished floor that they're not requesting.
I'm offering you something that you're not asking for. So,
I'm not-
I mean, he's
we're
not
gonna
turning,
push
I
the
don't mean
issue.
to speak for.
We're not going to push the issue. We can make it work. The other thing
Oh.
I would point out, again, in deference to what I think the intent of that might be, is that if we raise it, if we get it to the original height that we wanted, the site walls would get a foot higher too. And so by lowering it, I don't think it really impacted us in a measurable way in terms of the
Good.
architecture. I think that was Stacy's point. We can live with that, even though we're well under the height limitation. I don't think it really has an impact on us, so.
good, all right.
So what I hear you saying really is that even though we're trying to be nice to you, it raises more issues
I
than is
appreciate
worth it.
being nice to me, but I would encourage you to take a look at that code requirement, because, you know, the market has driven us in a different direction.
Right.
Those
Well-
guidelines were written back in the 80s
But
and
there's
90s.
another reason to have the cut and fill about equal, and that's so that nobody uses fill to try to get a better view and block their neighbors.
Well, so the argument from a.
I mean, that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, well, the argument that the architects would make, and I make this as an architect,
Okay, you
is
speak
that
for
as
the
long as
industry.
my roof doesn't impact the maximum height, it makes no difference. So, you know, with all due respect to adjacent property owners, they don't own that view,
Uh-huh.
right? So you want to be respectful of them, I get that, but you want to be respectful of the property owner as well. And so if I owned that property, yeah, I want to maximize my view, I want to get up as high as I can. I don't want to break through the plane that the zoning ordinance, that's the important thing. I think that's what I'm trying to tell you, is
Uh-huh.
that's the important. As long as you make certain that you're under that height, then you've satisfied the intent of the ordinance, so.
Okay.
All right.
Do I have a motion to approve case
Second,
2414 Mountainside with conditions?
second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, do have it, and so ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the way that you're going through the chair. You've been well-schooled to come before this committee.
I've been in your seat before.
Okay. The chair does need to maintain some level of, control, I think is the better word. The next case, agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on case number 2416, another Mountainside case.
Yes.
Stacy?
All right, thank you, Chairman Burns. This case is located on Golden Spur, also in Cowtrack Estates 2. Applicant is Mr. Phil Ostrom, with the owners as Stephen and Suzanne Kranick, neighbors to the recent case we just approved. As you can see, somewhat of within the vicinity, not sort of, I'm not neighbors right next door, but the location off of Golden Spur. As you can see, sort of again, in our lower density, rural 190 lots, as we call it, our Carefree Highlands. Excuse the reorientation, just wanted to fit the image better on the slide. But once again, you know, this is a property that does have features that do trigger our mountainside ordinance. We don't have kind of a magnitude of what that would be, but there's also, in this case, wash to consider, as well as steep slopes. But again, to point out, the development envelope lies with the shallowest slopes, as well as the associated utilities. Again, also looking at this in an overall as well as a little bit more detailed view. As you can see, this is a little bit more of a modest proposal in terms of its disturbance envelope. And as you can see, a majority of the lot remains open. You can see that in the more detailed plan, again, that you do see, so again, a limited building envelope. I think that the driveway, based on its location, is shortened as opposed to other locations, and re-veg is something that will be addressed. Related to the development standards, again, as similar to the last, 6% for lot coverage, 18% for lot disturbance. Those two criteria have been met with a little over 2% for lot coverage and about 14% for disturbance area. The setbacks do comply with zoning. This cumulative height, again, I think based on the fact that it's a little bit more of a level area that it's where the proposed development sits, is 23 feet 8 inches with an allowance up to 40. And the maximum building height, or the tallest height of this building, is 20 feet. In terms of grading and drainage, the town development standards reviewed by our town engineer have been met, as well as the cut and fill ratio has been met. And has been set on the plans that were submitted. Utilities are Carefree water for water, and then also similarly an on-site septic system for wastewater. But that is something under your purview that we'll talk about in just a moment. Again, just a representation of cumulative height. For the most part, lowest structure is only a few feet below the finished floor. In this case, we do have, I should have mentioned in the other case, you had renderings. In this case, there are renderings as well as a video, which I'll play for you, to sort of give you an idea of all sides of the development and how it sort of rests on the lot itself. Again, mostly sort of in a more level area of the property. Okay. I always feel like there should be music or something in there. Let me continue. Now, under your purview is a utility core revegetation. Typically, we like to see the utilities located tight in the building envelope, but there are certain circumstances that do necessitate a location further from the property, and so revegetation, of course, is something that's important to us and something that's important to be sure that is accomplished so that it looks similar to the desert that is left behind. Also, similarly, are the use of salvage vegetation and new native landscaping, and that is something that has been incorporated into the request in terms of that utility corridor vegetation, as well as the entire property. The citizen participation requirements have been met. There was also a reply to the applicant where the neighbor were concerned about construction and construction vehicles, and that will be sure. I'm sure the contractor and the applicants, the owners, will be sure that to be diligent about little disruption to their neighbors as possible. The conditions for this project for approval are attached to your report. And again, we have the applicant, the owners, and if there's anything that you'd like to ask of them or hear about their project, they're available.
Before we move to the applicant, can I ask you a couple of questions? One is, there was a mention of trenching.
Mm-hmm.
It was on page 72, but I didn't understand it.
Okay. Let's go back and look at, if you can see in the sort of larger representation, The trenching is tied to the septic system. So if you sort of look at the home and you can see the trench that sort of, for lack of better words, is heading kind of left, or, left on the plan, that's the trench to the septic system, to the fields. Mhm.
But it said something about trenching in disturbed areas, or?
Well, in disturbed areas, well, I'm gonna,
Let me see what the quote is.
okay.
Right here. However, in accordance with the zoning ordinance, any trenching within the building envelope requires approval from the DRB, which applies to this request.
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm talking, or do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I understand what you're saying. Could you tell me what,
It's on page.
which is the
Honestly,
heading?
It's on page 72 of 98.
Is it under the site utilities heading, or?
Sensitive feature, you get the picture with the map, and then you got the parcel map, and then the next page is landscaping.
Under landscaping, septic,
Yes,
okay.
There's a paragraph that begins the septic
Mhm.
system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so simply what it's stating is that under the Development Review Board's authority, because typically, what it means is that typically you would see utilities under the driveway or under the graded portion of the driveway, other than like a septic field necessarily. But in this case, because you're going sort of outside of that requirement and you're expanding upon that building envelope, it requires Development Review Board review and approval.
Because of the trench down to the field?
Yes, because it's sort of traversing the parcel more so than it would need to. Usually you'd have it tight to the development.
Okay, but if I could just
Mhm.
follow up with that. The last time we met, we were talking about the house that was going up on Horizon, between
Okay.
Rising Sun and Horizon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
that we were bringing water
Mhm.
from Rising Sun all the way up
exactly.
to Horizon.
Mm-hmm.
And I would guess that had to be trenched.
Yeah, and you looked at that, and you reviewed and approved that.
I see,
You
I'm
did.
so smart, I approved it, I didn't even realize I was doing it.
You did. But I'm glad I like that you're rethinking it.
Better watch out.
I like that you go project to project, though. I mean, each one is unique, so, but,
Right.
yeah, same idea, though. Mhm.
Okay, the second question that I have, and it has to do with the picture that you have, the site plan that you have up right now.
Mhm.
Just clarify for me, I know that we have 30 and 60-foot site setbacks.
Mhm.
Okay, so on what is the eastern side of this, it looks like our driveway or auto turnaround area there scrunches into the 30-foot setback over there.
Mhm.
Is it just the structure that has to be the 30-foot, or does that apply to the driveway and that turnaround area as well?
Typically structures. We do allow, grading. We do, like, for example, driveways and things like that. We do allow those in the setbacks.
Okay, so
Mhm.
we're not knocking on the door of anything bad here?
No. Mhm.
Okay, and I assume that there's no retaining wall on that?
Correct. Yeah, right. If there was more structure, we do allow walls halfway in our setbacks. We have some certain criteria that is allowed. There's things that aren't allowed. But in this case, a flat driveway area is permitted.
Well, the chairman's had his questions answered. Does anybody else have any questions? Would the applicant like to make we can bring up the music.
That would be great. Thank you, Chairperson and Commissioners. I don't have a presentation for you. Again, Stacy did a fantastic job. Thank you. I watched last month's and I saw how good of a job she did, and I thought,
Oh, thank you.
can't get any better than that. So,
Thanks.
but we are happy to field any questions for myself or the homeowners.
I have a question. We're offering 12-inch up and down here.
I just heard
trifecta,
about
so
that, yeah.
Do you, it's bargain day. Do you want one of those? It's on one time today only.
Luckily, our site does not,
If
luckily,
not,
the site does not require it.
If not, I think your plan is great, and I would approve it with the conditions.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion?
Thank you.
to approve?
Thank you.
So move.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those, I appear to have it, do have it so ordered. The next item on our agenda, I believe, is adjournment.
Can I just make one announcement, though, which I know you all are very aware of? It's a very fast one. Next month's meeting is at
Yes.
4 PM.
Yes. Yes.
I have to say it more for me, not really for anybody else, but it's at 4. Bye, thank you. Thank you.
See, I was ahead of you, I was here at
You are, that's right.
So I
Okay.
will
Now you can adjourn if you so move.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
second.
Okay, guys, all those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Opposed? I appear to do that, so ordered. The Development Review Board is adjourned.
Yes.
Can I just say something off the record? I'm very impressed as a new member. I am very impressed by the thoroughness and quality and factual